Okay, so this is just a quick video of a HDMI port replacement on PS4. As you can see, with those pins that was pushed back is a very, very common issue due to the ports that were originally put on the PS4s, which you'll see here in a second. The pins are exposed on the back side, so they push out easy. And fortunately for us, the pads on this one didn't get ripped. Sometimes it pulls the pads up off the boards, rips some traces. This time we were lucky. Um, on the second generation of the ports, which I'll be putting in, it's got the plastic backing, which stops. It reinforces the pins, so it stops them from coming out. What you're seeing me put on now is a bunch of low melt solder, which is, oh, it's your friend. It makes removing chips and ports and everything so much easier. All of your components on these consoles, they're done with unleaded solder, which has a very high melting temperature point, and this low melt solder. When you mix it in with it, it lowers the temperature as far as the melting point goes, so that you're not having to put too much heat into the board. Now, these boards, as far as the PS4s and pretty much every console, really, they absorb a lot of heat. So unfortunately, you do have to put in more heat. Just warm up the area of the board first so that you don't stand any chance of damaging it. Now here with the hot air station, like I was mentioning, because these boards absorb a lot of heat, it makes it easier as you're blowing the hot air to go ahead and just throw your soldering iron on there, and it helps remove the port very easy. As you can see, the port dropped out, everything's exposed. Just going ahead and mixing up the solder again, as far as making sure the low melt solder is mixed in real well. The wick here that I use the Goot wick, and I absolutely love this stuff. It's definitely worth paying a little bit of extra money to get a high quality wick versus buying that cheap crap that you get off of Amazon or eBay or whatever. Now here on the pads, which I'm cleaning now, be very gentle. The PS4 pads, especially the Xbox One pads, the Xbox One pad, the One S's, are extremely fragile and come off the board quite easy. You have to put very little pressure. Basically, just set your soldering iron tip on top of the wick and use the wick in an up and down motion to clear the pads. Now, these through holes, you can put a little bit more pressure on as far as getting solder out of them, which can be a pain in the ass because, like I said, they use unleaded solder, which has a very high melting temperature point. Sometimes, like you see now, you got to go through and add a little bit of extra so you can get those holes perfectly clear. Because the ports that you get in, it doesn't matter. I've ordered from multiple different sources, and it's a hit or miss. Sometimes they fit perfect, the pins line up on the pads amazing, and sometimes you've got to shift the port around a little bit. Now here, with your flux, after it cools down, it becomes a little bit sticky, hard to remove. Use your hot air station, warm it right back up. It comes off nice and easy with some rubbing alcohol. Just use 91% isopropylene. You can see right here, that top left, it's still got a little bit of that unleaded solder in there, so the port wasn't fitting in right. Having to go through now and just mix in some solder. Try to get it out. These through holes are just a pain in the butt. I hate them. But the port itself is a quick, simple fix. It's no biggie. See, as you can see here, the pins don't line up quite perfectly. So I'm going to have to, as I'm pressing down on the port, moving it to the left-hand side, trying to line up the pins as much as I can. Okay. Once you get it lined up pretty good, throw some flux on there, and then add a little bit of solder to your tip. And it's not going to matter if you bridge or anything. Here, I didn't get enough solder. Here we go. It doesn't matter if you bridge. all you're doing is just anchoring the port onto the board so that you can flip it to the back side and solder in the legs, which is just the mounting. It holds it. That's the only purpose Now, when you do this, you want to make sure that you get plenty of the solder in those ports there, or excuse me, the holes there, because that's what anchors the port in. So, you know, constantly plug in and unplugging the HDMI cord. If you don't have it filled up, the strain of it can cause it to damage the port, and then you got to go through and replace the thing again. I just did a quick little bit of solder at first just to get it anchored, then go back through, make sure that I'm adding the adequate amount of solder as far as filling up the holes. Alright, add a little bit of flux. Makes your joints nice and clean there. Flip it back over. Now I'm changing tips. I used the real big tip at first because the surface area, it allows you to put more heat to that point versus having a smaller tip where you're only putting a little bit of heat in at the point. So I switched over to a pencil type tip here because I'm dealing with just the pins and not the, you know, those big holes as far as mounting the port itself. Quick, easy here, just drag solder. Now when I did put the port, or excuse me, when I did initially put it on there, sometimes I put too much solder, so I used the wick there just to soak up a little bit of the excess. Go through. And then occasionally, you know, you just got to clean it up so that you can see better with it flux. Go back through, see there's a few bridges there, add some new flux. Bridges come right out. Okay. And the last few bridges. You can't have any of these pins bridged together. Alright, got them all the bridges undone. Pins are soldered nice and tight. For beginners, you always want to go ahead and check your pins. That's what I'm doing now, just a quick nudge on them just to make sure that they're soldered in place. Alright, hope you enjoyed the video.